A very good morning to one and all present over here. In this first International Olympic Research Conference, Day 3 organized by Bharat Center of Olympic Research and Education, Rashtriya Raksha University, Knowledge Partner, Indian Olympic Association, Premium Sponsor, ADC Bank, Silver Supporter, Sports for All, Strategic Partner, AISTS India, Industry Partner, Sportscom, Merchandise Support, Grabin Sports, Innovation and Technology Partner, Hyperlab, Knowledge Partner, Colas Design, Catering Support, Mohani Caterers, supported by Sports Authority of Gujarat. In yesterday's sessions, we have discussed with the expert on the topic Financing the Future Innovative Economic Models for Hosting the Olympic in India, Insight into Sustainability Funding and Investment, Strategic Olympic Communication, Building Global Positioning for Emerging Host Nations, Smart Sports Management, AI and IoT, Innovation in Sports, Fan Engagement and eSports, Balancing Cost and Benefit Financial Strategy for Olympic Ambition, a look at economic modeling, budget, and long-term analysis. For today's session, we will start with the expert session on the sustainability in venue design, green infrastructure, and the temporary venues. This topic will explore the design and construction of eco-friendly sports complexes, focusing on sustainable building practices and green infrastructure. It will cover the integrations of renewable materials, energy-efficient systems, and low-carbon technologies in venue design. Additionally, it will highlight the role of temporary venues, emphasizing cost-effective, environmentally friendly structure that can be repurposed or dismantled post-event. The discussion will also include circular economy principles aiming to minimize waste and promote material reuse. Experts are invited to share innovative solutions and best practices for creating sustainable sports venues that align with environmental goals and leave a positive legacy. Before welcoming our today's expert, I would like to take a moment to introduce our expert, Ms. ISHA Rathee. Ms. Rathee is a distinguished principal architect at Populous, an internationally recognized firm specializing in sports venue, entertainment facilities, and urban design. She is dedicated to creating innovative, functional, and sustainable spaces and even architect globally. Her expertise lies in integrating architectural design with user experience, ensuring that her project meet high standards of functionality while providing immersive experience for fans and communities. Ms. Rathee has played a key role in designing iconic sports venues and large-scale projects that shape the future of sports infrastructure. Additionally, she is committed to advancing sustainability and technology within the built environment, making a meaningful impact. With this, I would like to welcome our expert to the dais, Ms. ISHA Rathee, Principal Architect, Populous.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and it's great being here. Thank you for the very nice introduction as well. And to start with, I just wanted to say that sustainable venue design is something right now that's a really pertinent topic. It's something that we're discussing, just sorting out the technicality. Thank you. So, yeah, as I was saying, sustainable venue design right now is something that's really pertinent, especially considering the fact that we're creating a lot of these venues now within India as well. So to start with, I just wanted to first up discuss what do we really mean when we say venues, right? What are venues? We as Populous, we design venues globally. We're an international firm, and our venues are icons throughout the world. This is the London Olympic Stadium, which our firm was the architect for. So venues are iconic. They have an identity usually. This is the MSG Sphere. Again, something that is a city-defining icon. Again, a Populous project. As you can see, it's right now considered as one of the most technologically advanced arenas in the world. Now, venues are not just stadiums. They're also indoor arenas where you actually do host a lot of the indoor sports as well. Venues have atmosphere. Anyone who's ever been to a stadium, attended a game, you have that sense of belonging. It's about being part of something bigger. So that's something that we specialize in. How do you really create that atmosphere? How do you create that atmosphere? You know, something that you really want to keep going back to the venue rather than just watching the sports match on TV, basically. Now, a lot of actually science goes behind creating that atmosphere. It's not just about, you know, creating these steps where people go and sit. It's way, way, way beyond that. So we integrate a lot of AI into our work as well, and a lot of advanced technology to go through a lot of simulation models to figure out what is the best sort of viewing angle for these venues. How do you really create that atmosphere where all of these people have come together and they actually have a good time watching that match? It's about, you know, the right spectator angles. It's about that feeling of enclosure. A lot of things come together. Venues are flexible and adaptable. This, of course, you know, as anyone who's familiar with cricket, this is the Narendra Modi Stadium. And again, I was really fortunate to have worked on this project. Recently, I mean, just hosted the Coldplay concert just on Sunday. I don't know how many of you managed to go there, but it was a phenomenal success by any standard. So the thing is that the stadium can host cricket. It's flexible. It can also host concerts and many other sports as well. Venues are also catalysts for urban transformation. Just, you know, the nature of the size of these buildings, it takes up a lot of space. Plus, at the same time, a lot of people come here. Now, this image is of the London Olympic Park, and I will cover this project in a lot more detail later in the presentation as well. But it's something that really, you know, it brings people, it brings tourists, it brings a lot of advantages to the overall economy as well. And if designed properly, a lot of other development can come up around these venues. So it can really become a catalyst really for urban transformation. But at the same time, venues are also resource intensive. As I said, these are large buildings. Just in the nature of construction, they utilize a lot of materials. There's a lot of energy that goes into it. There's a lot of water consumption. And that's just during construction. During operation as well, you see that image over there? That's a giant LED screen. These can use a lot of energy. Sometimes, you know, for powering these venues, it can actually, the amount of power that's used can actually power 10,000 homes, for example, at the same time. So they're really resource intensive. And they also have, as I was mentioning, huge amounts of embodied carbon just because of the nature of the building itself. Also, venues can become white elephants if not designed properly. I don't want to go through too many of these images because we've all seen them, you know, past Olympic Games, past other events, things like that. You know, when the venue is not really designed to take care of the future, you end up with spaces like this. And then it's such a waste, right? Like you spend all of this money in creating these fantastic venues that really wow the entire world. And then 2 years later, it's like, you know, it's not used. So what's the point of creating venues like that, really? And why is that really important? So I think this diagram is probably one of the most important diagrams. And whenever I talk about sustainability and legacy, this is something I always bring up. So this is something, again, super critical for everyone to understand. When you think of a stadium or a venue, you think of something, oh, wow, it's going to cost me 500 crore. No, that's just the construction cost. And that's only 30% of the overall cost of the building. That building is going to cost you a lot more because we design these buildings to go for a 50 to 60, 70-year life. So 30% is actually your capital cost, which is, like I was talking about earlier, all your building materials, construction, things like that. 70% is actually all of your long-term running costs, building cost. And that's what a lot of people don't really factor in. And that is a huge factor in creating those sorts of white elephants. So this diagram is really, really important, and I would like everyone to just, you know, keep it in mind when we're going further through the presentation as well. So again, what's the importance of sustainable venues? Why are we really talking about it today? One is, of course, the environmental aspects of it, but equally important are the social as well as economic aspects. And I can't really talk about one aspect without really covering the others as well, because they all go hand in hand. Environmental aspects, as I just touched upon, are embodied carbon, operational carbon, renewable energy, how we integrate all of these things to create green venues, for example. Social aspects are all about enhancing the quality of life, inclusivity. If you're going to take up 50 acres or whatever, 25 acres of land in a space, you need to make sure that the community is also getting a benefit from that. So we need to make sure that these venues are also adaptable. Accessibility is a huge thing, to make sure that they're accessible by everyone, not just one person or 10 people or 1,000 people. You need to make sure everyone can access these. Similarly, economic, so the long-term revenue generation, we need to make sure that they're flexible, cost-efficient construction, and also it needs to boost the local economy. It needs to have some sort of impact on it. So to kind of explain all of these concepts, I've picked out 4 of our projects, and I'll talk through each of them to explain what all of these sustainable terms, kind of how we bring them together when we design these venues and sports parks. So the first one is the Kitech Sports Park. Second is O2 Arena in London. Sorry, Kitech is in Hong Kong. It's just about to be opened this month, actually. The O2 Arena is in London, London Olympic Park, and the SVB Sports Enclave, which is actually in Ahmedabad. So it's very contextual for everyone here. So the Kitech Sports Park, this is a project that we've been working on since 2019. And as I said, that this is something that is now, it's being opened this month. It has a main stadium, a public sports ground, as well as an indoor arena and retail. So the Kitech Sports Park, it's got a really interesting story. It's actually a brownfield site. This was anyone who's familiar with Hong Kong would know that there was the old Kitech Airport. So what we've done is, so that was the old Kitech Airport, which was disused for many years. So we have created the Kitech Sports Park over there. So that's Victoria Harbour that you can see in the backdrop. So again, from a stadium perspective, there's no other, I mean, it's such an iconic location to be overlooking Victoria Harbour. We've got the main stadium, which is about 50,000 seats. There's an events village, an indoor sports center, a neighborhood park, retail, public sports ground, health and wellness. And there's this big avenue that you kind of see over there, right in the middle. The idea with this project was to make sure that people from the surrounding areas, everyone's aware of Hong Kong's density and how, you bring people into the sports park, make them walk through this entire avenue of retail and other activities that are happening to lead you to the stadium. In terms of green certification, so we are going for all of these ratings right now. And I just thought for this particular example, I'll walk everyone through because, again, I'm not sure how many people have an understanding of architecture over here, but just so that everyone kind of understands the various steps that we go through in order to make a building green. So I'll just cover some of those first. So typically, we'd break it up into these 7 categories. You've got the energy aspects, the environmental quality aspects, transportation, materials, water, land use and ecology, and then the overall community benefits. So in terms of the first one, energy. So in Kitech, what we've done is we've made sure that there's, as I was saying, there's a lot of light, basically, that uses a lot of energy for these venues in terms of powering them, in terms of making sure that the right lux levels are maintained for spectator viewing, for media, for broadcasting. A lot of those things are very high, energy consuming. So one aspect has been to make sure that, we can reduce that as much as possible and optimize it. So in terms of all the public spaces, we've been trying to create skylights and then just using more energy efficient lights. We've also looked at materials such as ETFE to cover a lot of these spaces, again, because it's translucent, so it allows natural light in. Then we're also looking at solar panels. So those have been installed in various parts of the site. And also it's sometimes, again, I just want to add over here, sometimes it's not really possible to integrate solar panels in certain projects, lack of space, things like that. But in those cases, what you can actually do is you can do a deal with another sort of site or with another organization that can provide you with that power, which is green power, which is again something that we do in other projects as well, where it hasn't been possible to really install the panels on site. Again, we've ensured that, we've got systems such as the district cooling system, things like that. So they've been installed at various parts. And also, again, because of its location, in this specific case, we've also been able to use wind power. Then in terms of the overall environmental quality, again, anyone who's been to an indoor stadium or, even an outdoor stadium, it can get very uncomfortable if there's not proper circulation of air, if there's not, proper ventilation, things of that sort. So it's really important to make sure that your overall sort of space has that movement, basically, of air to create a comfortable environment. We're also looking at green roof coverage and then various aspects of soft landscape, which allow us to reduce the overall urban heat island effect. Because again, as I was saying, it's a 60-acre site, right? So you end up using so much material, and then that does end up creating a heat island if you don't actually counter that right from the beginning, from the design stages, to make sure that we add a lot of soft landscape and reduce that overall paved surface. From a transportation perspective, again, this comes back to the accessibility point that I was talking about. So we've made sure that this entire site is very accessible from public transport, and then it's a totally walkable site. You can actually walk from the main station plaza all the way through to the stadium, and the entire way has been provided with canopies, covered areas to make that experience enjoyable for people who are actually coming there. It can't just be, in the heat and everything. You really need to make sure that that experience is a good one for people. Otherwise, they won't want to come back. In terms of materiality, now, over here as well, there are many different ways in which you can look at materials. You can look at materials which have an overall lower embodied energy, but again, sometimes with these buildings, they're so specialized. So what we also look at is sourcing materials which are more sustainable in terms of its location, so that you don't have to import materials from halfway across the world. So it is something that we look at, that, how can we reduce that distance in terms of materials. We also have various waste management facilities on site, making sure that, composters are there, recycling is there, a lot of those aspects. From a water utilization perspective, again, there's rainwater harvesting, making sure that, as much of that water can be reutilized. Specifically for the pitch area as well, so 25% of the total irrigation demand will actually be met through rainwater harvesting. And that's something that's really good, because again, these pitches can actually utilize a lot of water. Oh, sorry. This was one of our first sort of sketches of the project. So again, you can see how that kind of converts to the overall vision, but it's something that really carries through, and you can see that the green is actually a massive part of this project. So overall, 30% of the site will actually be green, and that's not just by providing grass, it's by utilizing a lot of different types of soft landscape materials, creating a neighborhood park, spaces where people can actually come, so that the entire site gives back to the community. And it's not just a stadium that's enclosed. You can actually have people going there for an evening walk, walking around it, running around, interacting really with these venues that have just suddenly come up in their city. And again, from a community perspective, as I said, it's such an important site. So we've had to make sure that the community is on board as well with what we're creating over there, and that it's something that will be of use to them. So apart from the stadium, we've got a lot of these other sort of spaces where the community, smaller events can also happen, and not just large, sports events and concerts. Now, again, coming back to some of the tools that we use. So we do look at, specifically in a climate such as, in Delhi or in Ahmedabad and, hotter sort of areas, the amount of solar radiation that actually falls over here is quite significant. So we make sure that we do a lot of simulation studies to assess that, and then based on that, we're able to decide what is the proper coverage of the roof, right? So that when people are sitting and watching a match, they need to have that sort of solar protection, shade, things of that sort. So these sort of studies help us with that. And then again, in cold climates, it helps us because, in case there's not enough light and things like that. So there's a lot of different ways in which we utilize these simulations, and we do this for all of our projects. So from a material perspective again, so that's the facade of the stadium. It's like a really, really beautiful building. I was just there 2 months ago, and it's actually come up exactly like this. So a lot of times, you'll see a render that an architect produces, and then the final outcome can be pretty different. In this case, I can tell you the building looks exactly like that. So it's a project that we're really proud of, and it's a beautiful one. And if everyone can ever visit it, I would really encourage that. So you see, it has all of these panels. Now, from a material perspective, a lot of time actually goes in resolving those panels. Now, people who aren't architects may not understand the complexity of it, because each panel ends up being custom made, and that can end up causing a lot of wastage of material, because sometimes, if you have a standard panel size, you just put that, great, it's a rectangle and you've put it over there. But for aesthetic purposes, sometimes you do want to create those cool shapes, and that can really create these sort of wedges, which causes a lot of wastage of material. So what we try to do is we try to optimize that, and again, that's AI driven, that's script driven, things like that, that we make use of that to ensure that that wastage is as less as possible. So again, that was an under construction photo from last year. So overall, it helps reduce the fabrication costs, and it increases the overall design accuracy and efficiency. The second project that I wanted to talk about was the O2 Arena. So the original Millennium Dome was not built by us. This was created for the Millennium celebrations in the UK. Now, so this, I've called it a £1 billion white elephant. That's not my statement. That's something that's been said about it in the past. So it's a really iconic sort of building. But on this 1st of January 2000, that's what it looked like from the inside. That was when, it was a new building. It was, wow, fantastic, amazing. And, we had all of these great celebrations over there. But 2 years later, that's what it looked like. To go from that to that in a matter of 2 years, after the amount of money that's spent on a venue like that, that's criminal wastage, I would call it. So we were appointed to figure out how can we make use of this building. And what we've proposed over there is an indoor arena, actually. So it's a 20,000 seat arena. And we did that by preserving the structure. So we actually didn't remove that entire structure. We built under it. So we reused the existing building with a completely different purpose, completely different, space under it. So that's what it looks like now. So that's the O2 Arena. That's an arena, and you can have all sorts of matches over there. It's actually even hosted Olympic events. And how do we do that? It's, by creating this really flexible space. It's not something that we're making that, oh yeah, sure, you can have a basketball game over there. No, that's not the point. We need to be able to have multiple events over there. It can go from an end stage concert mode to a center stage boxing match, tennis, basketball, any sort of event really can be hosted at the O2. And that's what makes it the best arena in the world. Consecutively over the last 15 years, it's been the most utilized venue. And the key to that is flexibility, making sure that we design it in such a way that the venue can be used for as many events as possible throughout the year. So you see, that's the venue. We didn't change it. That roof is still the same. We just came in, redid it from inside, and we have a spectacular venue. Now, this venue has also been the means to be an urban catalyst. We've come up, apart from the arena itself, there's been a lot of development that's happened. Because as I was saying at the start of my presentation as well, these venues, they're big, they draw in people. People are coming from all over the world. So why wouldn't you create a lot of other development around it to make it a truly sustainable space where, you could have a hotel, you could have, which we have over there, you can have retail and commercial. People come over here, spend time. In the arena itself, we've also got retail. So it's like a, it's a full ecosystem, basically, of a place where people can come and spend time. There's also a transport hub, again, to assess the sustainable aspect. So when I visited this, yeah, you take a train, get off over there, walk into the venue. Nobody brings their car. From a 20-year development, it's created 24,000 jobs. It's probably more by now. 10,000 new homes, 3.5 million square feet of commercial space, 360,000 square feet of retail space. plus hotel and community, and it's still growing. This is not that, this is it. We've already created all of this around it. It's going to keep growing, more development, more space, more people. For my next example, I'm going to cover the London Olympic Park. But before we get to that, I just wanted to say that some sports parks are more successful than others. And one of the major reasons for that is what I've spoken about till now. That's the overall legacy, the overall sustainability of that venue and of that park. This was the London Olympic Park before work started on it. It was a contaminated wasteland. It had high tension wires. The area around it was terrible. Nobody wanted to go. I know when our team was working over there, everyone used to be worried about safety aspects and things like that. So, I mean, yeah, that's really not a place you'd want to go. It became that for the Olympics. And it's that now. How is that achieved? It's by creating that long-term vision. It's not just about creating the venue. It's about creating the overall space, the overall area, thinking about the future. If you don't have this long-term vision, in order to figure out what is it that this is going to look like 10 years down the line after all the events, all the games, everything is done, that's not sustainable. The areas in pink are all actually temporary. So this is one of the images from the games mode. So you can see all of those areas, sorry, not the Olympic Village, that's not temporary. I mean that it's like temporary in terms of its usage, right? So your main venues, which is the Olympic Stadium, the Aquatic Center, the Velodrome, the Copper Box, all of these remained as it is, and they're still there today if you go there and visit. And they're actually used quite a bit. All the pink was all the area that was required to make those venues function during the games. That's a significant area, the overlay spaces, the temporary spaces that go along with these venues. And then again, if you don't plan about what's going to happen in those areas later, it's just going to be wasted space. It's just going to lie empty, will become derelict. It will be those, small pockets of area where nobody wants to go. So again, really critical to think about what's really going to come there. So these are some pictures of the London Olympic Park now. It's a beautiful wetland site. There's a nice river going through it. It's given it back to the people. People walk from one end of the park to the other. I've personally done that as well. Walked all the way from the stadium to the other side, which is the Velodrome. Create these kind of public spaces where people can go. And some of the buildings have actually now been taken over by university campuses, by other retail, by other commercial opportunities, other mixed-use development. So there's a lot of stuff that's actually going on over there. So it's now one of Europe's fastest technology growing hubs. So again, it's really up to us. How creative can we be when we think about how these spaces are going to be used? But the critical thing is to plan it in right at the beginning to make sure that it's sustainable. Again, this just kind of shows you that's the main plan, but that's all the area that really goes in just hosting the event. For example, the dining area, catering area, broadcasting area, it's a pretty sizable area. And all of that goes away once the game is done. Now, the Olympic Stadium, so again, we were the architects for the Olympic Stadium as well. So we used a lot of different sort of methodologies within it at that time. This was back in 2010, 2009. So that image over there, again, not sure how clear it is to everyone, but we've got the London Olympic Stadium footprint, the section at the bottom, and then you can see overlaid with that is one of the previous Olympic stadiums. And you can see the difference in the size. Sorry, the pointer is not working, but you can see the difference. So the London Olympic Stadium is that, and then you've got the previous Olympic Stadium, which is that. So what we did was, by smart design, we made sure that a lighter, flexible, more sustainable, and a more efficient design was created. We were able to overall reduce the amount of steel construction, concrete construction significantly. So that, again, it reduces your overall embodied energy. It reduces your overall costs and makes the venue more sustainable. Again, from a roof perspective, we put a lightweight, removable roof as well. Again, all of these factors were at play. And the facade also was a membrane-wrapped facade. So the idea was that after the games, that material could be used somewhere else as well. So it's about repurposing materials, not making those spaces flexible, making them adaptable. Coming to temporary. Again, with this stadium, when we started designing it, the brief was 25,000 permanent, 55,000 temporary. What we also planned in this was, again, a lot of people may not consider it, but you think of a stadium, think of the number of toilets and amenities that are required. The amount is actually pretty significant. Also, the amount of food and beverage spaces. If the venue is not going to be used by its full capacity, those supporting areas are also wasted. They're all wasted space. And then the owner of the venue has to spend considerable amount of money in making sure that those spaces are kept clean, kept maintained. So again, your maintenance cost goes high. So that was another aspect that we considered in this. You see all of those pods. A lot of them were actually your food and beverage and amenities and things like that, which were temporary. And then we were able to remove them after the games. So again, see how simple that section is. It's just a lightweight structure. It brought the cost down. It brought this, gives great sustainability benefits. A lot of things over there. Now, this graph is again quite interesting. It shows you how much temporary seating was used in various games. So Sydney, about 150,000. Athens and Beijing, less than 100,000. And London is like way up there, above 250,000. Paris has also done a similar thing. I believe their temporary seating was also around 200,000. Right? So I think there's a full pattern, really, that you can see over there when you think about successful games and temporary seating. I'm not going to state the obvious. Again, cricket fans will know what that venue is. That's Lord's, the home of cricket. Again, Populous has been fortunate to be involved in that. Can anyone tell me what happened during the games over here? No. Okay. Archery. A cricket venue, home of cricket, was used for archery during the London 2012 games. And all of that was temporary seating. 5,000 spectators, great experience, great facility. And more than that, it creates a background. It creates something that's memorable. Who wouldn't want to go to Lord's and watch an archery match with that background? It creates a memorable moment, something that you'll remember throughout your life. Similarly, I think this was the Horse Grounds parade grounds. Another iconic location in London, full temporary seating. And look at that kind of backdrop. Again, that's something that Paris has done so fantastically well. Everyone who's seen visuals of that, I don't think anyone's ever going to forget, the backdrop of the Eiffel Tower. So there's this whole evolution, right? That it's not just about the venue, it's also its location. How can you really make use of that overall setting? This, again, was one of the temporary venues in the Olympic Park. This was the basketball arena. So far, we've been talking about, these scaffold-like seating, basically. That's what temporary venues are. It's not more complicated than that. It's scaffolding. Of course, it's complicated from a constructability perspective, making sure the right materials are used, how is it actually going to be designed, all of those things. But when you compare it with a permanent venue where you've got so many other different materials, there's a significant difference over there. So how would an indoor venue of this sort work? So that's the basketball arena. That's the inside of the basketball arena. Again, temporary seats. The whole thing was dismantled after the games. And actually the seating was used in some other venues as well. Again, it's great. It gives that land back to the people. Now, it's not just about Olympics, even cricket. So we're doing this. So we did this for the World Cup recently. So that's the Nassau County Stadium. So that was a fully temporary stadium. Those seats were actually from the Las Vegas Grand Prix. So it's a fantastic example of how that seating from one venue, one event, which doesn't need it after the event, can be used for something else, repurposed, and then again from here, it's gone, it's removed, it's taken away, and you get that land back. Because if you don't need that venue, why build it? So just very quickly, I'll just give a summary of the 5 sort of key advantages that we see. I mean, of course, there are a lot more, but these are some of the 5 key ones. So you've got faster construction times. Typically, it's like 6 to 12 months. You can construct one of these venues if you're on an depending on the size, scale, complexity, but it's much faster than permanent construction. It can reduce your overall long-term costs, of course, from a maintenance and life cycle perspective. But with that, there's a slight caveat, which is that you need to make sure that that production, that structure can also happen, that it can be transported to the site. There are a lot of other considerations as well. And then again, it's not necessarily overall cheaper, basically. I would want to highlight that. It really depends on other factors as well. It allows you to avoid white elephants, because the venues can be dismantled after the event, after they fulfilled their purpose, so they don't need to stand there, not being utilized. The materials can be reused, as I just gave the example of some of these other temporary venues. You can reuse that same material and transport it somewhere else to use. And then the overall adaptability of the space. Like I was talking about the horse grounds parade, right? The government is not going to allow you to build a permanent venue over there. It's going to spoil that space, right? Similarly, Eiffel Tower, you're not going to build a permanent stadium in front of the Eiffel Tower, but you can build a temporary one. You can maximize the use of that iconic location, that iconic visual, by creating a temporary venue, which can then be removed. So the last example that I'll come to is the one in Ahmedabad currently, which is being worked upon. So this was our first initial sort of master plan vision for this project. It's a place for the people of Ahmedabad. It needs to have event-ready facilities. Now, this is something that is what we're making sure, that it needs to be able to host multiple types of events. And the challenge here is also considering how that space is going to be used right now, before it hosts any event. And of course, afterwards as well. We're looking at, of course, state-of-the-art venues. It needs to serve as an urban catalyst for the entire area, boosting the overall infrastructure, and at the same time making sure that sustainability is at the heart of this entire development. So that's the Ring of Unity, as we like calling it. It overlooks the riverfront. So you can see that the entire riverfront has been planned as really a public park for the people. It's something that you can walk through. You'll have retail activities, commercial activities, with the venues behind it. So that again, the venues don't really become these dead, unused spaces. We want to make sure that it's a vibrant hub of activity throughout the year. Just again, for people who aren't familiar with the location, so it's coming up around Modi Stadium. It's very close to the airport, and it's got great connectivity, which is being strengthened. Now, again, just to kind of explain how we see this as an urban catalyst, we're looking at all of these variety of sort of supporting infrastructure, supporting developments coming up alongside this. Now, some of the strategies that we've been employing in this are, making sure that it's a carbon neutral enclave, construction using waste materials, biodiversity gain, again, because of the entire riverfront, passive cooling strategies, and then again, from a city level, making sure that, as much as possible, it should be a zero waste enclave, needs to focus on cradle to cradle strategies, a positive community benefit for everyone around that area, and again, sustainable sourcing, making sure that even the materials that we source for this are sustainably sourced. Just again, a quick sort of summary of some of the aspects considering it. That's the site. And very quickly, so that everyone understands from a site perspective, this is the entire riverfront that is being proposed. as the development corridor, the green park, various connections to the city. And again, those are all various metro stations. So the idea is that people should be able to walk directly from those metro stations to this park. The three sort of sports zones. One obviously is the Modi Stadium existing. These are the various new venues that are coming up. And the cool thing about these is that they're not all permanent. We are looking at permanent plus temporary, and a combination of both. All of them interspersed with these, little hubs of activity, which have worked so well in some of our other projects as well, where you've got F&B, the public park, commercial offices, a lot of things that kind of come together to make this a vibrant area. And how that entire linkage goes from one part to the end of the site. And again, looking at plazas, these walkable plazas with shaded space, so that wherever you are, you're not more than 500 meters away from something that's cool. You can walk from one. And again, it's a 300 plus acre site, so it's pretty big. That's a view of the master plan. And as I said, legacy is something, whatever events it may host, it's something that we're already thinking about. Making sure that, there's a sporting institute potentially, then there's a football zone, art and culture zone, event district, and your overall riverfront area. It's really a legacy for the city. Now again, just to show the kind of, thought process and diagrams, we start from that kind of simple sketch at the top left, all these bubbles that kind of come together to really create meaning. And that's where, again, we're inspired by, obviously, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who the enclave is named after as well, and he stands for unity. So we've created this really cool ring of unity, really, that's this, almost like a city square, where people can come. It's the 7th venue. During any event, it could host a temporary venue. Again, creating flexibility, making sure that it's used. Sorry, that's just getting repeated. But yeah, that's a lot of, other sort of facilities that are going to come up potentially. Now that's the tennis center. There's a reason for why it's been designed like that. It sits amidst the greens. The whole idea is a sports park. Let's bring the park back into the park. And here as well, we've planned for legacy to make sure that the same venue, if you don't need such a large venue, can we already plan in that temporary seat, still within the design, to make it a good design, but that temporary seat can be removed or added, whatever that may be. Making sure that the community feels part of it. So creating those views that, even while you're inside the venue, you have that whole connection to the riverfront, connection to what's happening outside. So to sum up, I'll just come back to this slide, which is the importance of sustainable venues. As I said, I can't really separate the three things, because you may do environmental sustainability, you may spend a lot of money in going through all your renewable energy and making sure that it's the latest energy systems. All of those things you can do. If you don't plan for legacy, what's going to happen to that venue? Again, all your money is going to go down the drain. So it's making sure that all three of these things go hand in hand. Otherwise, it's not really sustainable, right? So what's the future of sports infrastructure? It's not just about building venues. It's about creating venues that are smarter, more adaptable, more community, and more environment focused. These are things that we're doing, and we're going to keep doing to make sure that our venues are successful now and into the future. Yeah, thank you. See, I'll just pass. Any questions? Yes.
Yes, it was an insightful session. So starting from the percentage of capital and running costs and importance of sustainability and aspect to look upon when talking about the sustainability. So we now open the floor for the questions and answer session. So no questions is too small or too big. So I request the delegates to put up their questions.
Hello. Good morning, ma'am. My question is to you is that as India is the city, as in India, the cities are mostly very populated with the infrastructure. What sustainable features do you think would really connect with local communities in India when you design an Olympic venue?
Yeah. So I think sustainability, as I was talking about, it's very contextual, right? It's very specific to the location as well, because you need to make sure that the local community is benefiting from that. In the term of materials as well, since your specific question is about that, I think materials is also very location driven. As I was talking about in the Hong Kong example, it's also a very dense urban city. So it's not like, it's dissimilar from a lot of Indian cities from a density perspective. So your materiality has to be chosen very carefully. Now, in that, again, I want to be honest over here. There's a lot of, there are two parts to it. One is, as architects, what your client really wants. And the other aspect is things that may be more environmentally friendly. And it's how you really bring those two things together to create a sustainable venue. Now, India has a huge history of sustainability. It's not just something that's, that we've been talking about for the last 10, 15, 20 years. It's something that goes back thousands of years. Even in Ahmedabad, if you look at it, this is an example, again, that we bring up many times, which is the stepwell, right? There's a beautiful stepwell over here, the other large stepwell. The entire idea behind that was to make use of passive cooling. Why passive cooling? It responds to the climate. It responds to the immediate local context and the need of the people at that time, right? And it uses the climate basically to make sure that the kind of stepwell and it's using water basically as evaporative cooling. So it is contextual in terms of how do you really create a sustainable venue. There's no one size fits all. Sure, you can put solar panels on every building, you can use the newest sort of energy efficient systems. Those are things that a lot of venues do use and they have to use. But over and above that, that's kind of what I'm saying, over and above that, there's that local context, that local sort of flair that really needs to come in from a sustainability aspect as well.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for a great session. I just want to ask one question. When we talk about the sustainability and the post-event maintaining that infrastructure, the problem what we have seen is that this infrastructure won't get available for the general public or for the event organizers easily. The accessibility and approachability is very concern over here. Because if you see the infrastructure built in Pune, like at the time of Commonwealth, it is not accessible to the general public or the event organizers easily. Like other infrastructure is the same issue.
Right. I completely appreciate your question, and I think that's something that is a conversation with local governments as well, and that's something that's changing. Now, I think that mentality has changed within India. So far, it has been to keep the venue, locked up, that sort of thing, which is what you're talking about. But I think that's changing, and as soon as they start seeing the economic benefits of making that venue available and of that utilization of that venue, and how I think it kind of ties back to economics really. If they see that benefit that yes, by hosting all of these events we can actually generate revenue, and it's not just going to mean that our venue is going to get spoilt, because I think that's a lot of the concern for a lot of people as well. I think that's something that will come up. Now, example, Modi Stadium so far, right? It's only in the past, it's mostly been used for cricket. Now, recently, it's held the most successful concert India's ever seen, right? Now, I think taking that as an example, we're going to see a lot more of these events, and it's a mindset change that's happening. And it is something that's happening. We're seeing it because we're working on a lot of projects throughout the country. It may not be seen in every single place yet, but it is something that's happening, and it's something that, again, as I said, it's about making sure that people understand the advantages, and also about right at the beginning planning that thought process in, that yes, this venue is not just for 3 events in the year. We do want to make sure that this venue is utilized for 50 events in the year, potentially 100. So yeah, I think that's a bit of a mindset change.
Hi, Moushmi here, PhD student in disaster management. I just wondering, okay, as if whenever a venue is created, right, there is lot of harm of bioecosystem. So do you have any sort of idea, okay, how can we preserve the bioecosystem of that place?
Right.
Just wondering. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that's something that I think architects, urban planners throughout the world, we really struggle with that question, because, again, building something, you do create foundations, you are kind of spoiling that overall site. So it ends up becoming, how much can you preserve? How important is that site? What kind of local ecology does it have? And by preserving it, it comes to a sort of a benefit analysis that you need to do at that time. Can that be replicated? Sure, that once you've planned your venue, once you've done certain things, can you recreate that area? Can you leave certain portions of it? Because again, whenever you're building something, it is going to take up that land, right? Like, it's not possible to really keep that land as it is and then still create a huge giant venue. So there is that thing, but I think throughout the world people have become more sensitive to this. This is again a conversation that we end up having on every project, that how can we be more eco-sensitive, more conscious of how that entire site it can be maintained, and what are the various important aspects that do absolutely need to be preserved from that site.
Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the full question.
How can we, maintain the temperature of the venue without actually heating up the surrounding area of Ahmedabad in Summer Olympics?
Right. So, again, with that, we do employ a lot of these energy efficient systems now, which do make sure that we reduce the amount of heat that's generated into the atmosphere. But again, I don't want to lie and say that that's not going to happen. That will happen. So that's why we need to make sure that we allow for that mitigation, right? And that's really possible by making sure that we make sure that there's a lot of soft landscaping there as well, making sure that there's a lot of tree cover, a lot of things like that. But primarily it is going to be by 2 aspects. One is making sure that as much as passive cooling that we can do within the venue, as much as possible, we need to first rely on that, and then make sure that the systems that we use for cooling those venues are as energy efficient as possible, and the amount of heat that's released back is as less as possible. There are also some systems in which that heat can be transferred and it can be used for other activities as well, but those systems can actually cost a lot of money. So again, that's a conversation that you need to have with the people who are actually spending the money in building that venue, to make sure that they understand what that benefit could potentially be and whether they want to invest in those kinds of systems. And it's really, again, it's about looking into the future, the 20-year plan, creating that to educate everyone about what that benefit would be. But again, there are systems that can do that.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for a very insightful presentation. It's more a couple of comments, really, having had the pleasure of working for both London and Paris. Just to your point, temporary venues are an excellent way to avoid waste and the so-called white elephants. But you said it, but I want to highlight it, they're not cheap.
Exactly.
They can be very expensive because they have to be robust structures that can accommodate thousands of people over an extended period of time. They get constructed very quickly. And also what you end up doing is you essentially drain the market in a certain way over a very short period of time. To take the example of Paris, you used about, as you said, about 200,000 temporary seats. We had to go all over Europe to find those 200,000 seats. Yes. And they did not come cheap. Now, I know that things happen differently here. Maybe you can produce them in 2 minutes here. But it is something that in our case, it was an extremely complicated thing to do, which we had not necessarily anticipated. And then I think the second thing that is important also especially with temporary structures, is the so-called Olympic premium pricing, in the sense that if you try to do a temporary venue, and in normal condition, it might cost you X amount of money. With the games, there's usually a bit of a premium of 10, 15, maybe even higher %, just because it's the event. And people say, well, you need it, you're under time pressure, I have it, you pay an extra. So these are small things that we don't necessarily think about 10 years prior to organizing the games and when we build a budget, but are important considerations to keep in mind, because when you design a procurement strategy, no offense, but it's almost as important as designing the venue, because the venue can be fantastic, but then if you cannot get the material at a reasonable price, then the budget skyrockets. So small, I think, addition to your point, because I think the best vision can become a victim of its own success and of its own visibility. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that.
Hi, Ishaji. Very good morning. First of all, thank you so much for coming all the way. And just to tell the audience that Madam has made some rearrangements in her schedule in order to come here and speak. So thank you so much for that. In addition to what Mr. Lambis spoke right now, sometimes we have seen that while having any of the sustainable venues, or for that matter, I would say any of the sustainable initiatives, we have to look for a lot of resources which are not very readily available. Apart from that, it is not at all economical, I would say. So what is the mantra here? Do we need to find a balance of it? Or are there any innovations which are yet to come, which will find a better solution when we talk about sustainability, and including in everything, in mega events, in venues, and everything?
Like you said, I think it is about finding that balance, and it's about having that conversation very early on in the overall process to make sure that all the stakeholders understand what the impact of those decisions is going to be. And it's not just, again, it's not a 1-year impact, 5-year impact. It's really talking about the 20-year impact. Now, some of those innovations, as you're calling them, they may be very prohibitive at the onset. When you tell a client, oh my God, this is going to cost you 10 crore, just one small thing, you're like, why should I spend in that? So it's about educating the client that, okay, if you spend this money now, you may feel that it's more on the outset, but 20 years down the line, it's something that's actually going to reap you dividends, potentially. And again, there's a lot of research that goes into every single sort of strategy and proposal that we put forward. It's really important because the client is not expected to know that. So that onus really falls on the architects, on the designers, on people advising the client to ensure that they're aware of all of these factors that kind of come in to influence these things, basically. So it is definitely a balance.
So I'll have a quick follow-up question, because we want to extract all what you have. So as you are talking about that, you have to give that vision what an architect have or the firm have to the client. So now the client is India. So if we are going to have or bid for the future games, all of us are going to be clients, because whether it is publicly or whether it comes to corporate finance, it has to be Indians and it has to be India. So the client is India. So what would be your take in that sense? And if you can recommend some of the innovations which are very much required at the moment in order to solve all those future problems. Not all those, but at least some specific problems.
That's not a small ask. So I think it kind of comes back to what I've been talking about, right? And it also comes back to my first answer, that it's about finding that balance, right? India wants to host some of these major events. I don't want to specifically say Olympics. We want to host a lot of these large events, and there's a huge sort of focus on sports and education in sports, and then overall, making sure that these events do actually go off in a successful manner within the country. So it is going to be about figuring out what that infrastructure really needs to be. Now, even within the infrastructure, there was an article that I read some time ago which came up that, oh, you know, this so-and-so sort of city wants to host some event and they're planning on creating 30 new stadiums. Why would you want to make 30 new stadiums in one city? It just doesn't make sense, right? So it is about doing that benefit analysis of saying, okay, can this same venue be used for more than one event? So it's what you asked is actually a very complicated sort of question, because it's not just that, okay, one venue is going to host only one sort of sports event. The calendar is planned well in advance to make sure that, okay, fine, you can maybe, you know, have 3 events at the same thing if it's planned properly, you know, and if it's flexible enough, you can actually do that. So rather than creating 30 new stadiums, you may end up only creating 10 new venues. Like Paris did, can you use some of the existing infrastructure like the O2 Arena as well, for example? Is there that existing infrastructure that can be repurposed? Make it more sustainable so that you're not, you know, demolishing the entire thing and you're actually reusing that venue in a totally different way. So there is that aspect as well. And then the third aspect is, of course, temporary venues. And as I'd mentioned in my presentation, and as you've also just pointed out, they're not necessarily cheaper, but they may be slightly cheaper at the onset, but again, the procurement cost, things like that can come in, which can make it more expensive. But then they do have those benefits. So it's not that, you know, we'll suddenly go and say, yes, let's make everything temporary. That's not advisable either. Plus, within a country such as India, we've all seen the state of some of the infrastructure currently existing. And I think we can all agree that it does need that upgrade. So if we're aspiring to host all of these great events, we are going to invest in those venues to make sure that that infrastructure is increased. And we will build new infrastructure, whatever is required. So it's about making sure that we have that plan, that legacy plan also in place, that what are these venues going to be used for.
Hi,
Last
Isha.
question.
Does that answer?
You done, Utsav? Hi. Isha, hi. Just wanted to, I just had a different take on the subject. We talk about legacy issues. It might be true for countries which has a population which is not in the age bracket what India does. India has a population of youth which is the maximum in the planet, on the planet. So point being that we should, I feel, we should not be too bothered about how the infrastructure which comes up gets used. Because we have now, culture is setting in, the thought has gone through that sports is here to stay, and overall the flow of thoughts and ideas and efforts are towards getting the culture back. So legacy issues, I feel, should not be a constraint with respect to construction and construction of temporary structures. Now, we've seen through the presentation that all the cities that we've talked about, all the major host cities have been populated cities which have limited space. Once space is not a constraint, we need not look for temporary structures. We can go in for permanency, some level of permanency, yes, with the due diligence and due thought with respect to how it's going to be used thereafter. And I'm sure suitable plans meeting the requirement can be drawn out. Also, the life, we are a developing nation. We have some distance to cover. We need our structures in place for next 40 to 50 years. So getting a temporary structure vis-a-vis a permanent structure is something which can be deliberated upon. However, a permanent structure giving some permanency, well thought out, with all the ecological parameters in mind, I think should not be a bad idea. Also, thoughts on new areas which are less populated outside city, where location is not an issue, or the size of new construction is not a problem. I think that we can incorporate into planning for our cities, because the dependency on these infrastructures is going to be large. Gradually, population is large, youth is large, sports growing. I think that we can look at it.
No, I take your point. Like, I understand what you're trying to say. But in that, I just wanted to add one more consideration. That is, it's not just about the venue, right? We can create a venue anywhere. We can create it in the middle of a field as well. But if people can't get to that venue, if the supporting infrastructure of the roads, the transport network, those are things also that need to then kind of come up at the same time. So I agree with you in that point that, of course, the kind of population that we have, the kind of interest that we're seeing, and that's exactly why, what I was saying earlier, that I would fully recommend that we need to build this infrastructure, a lot of it. We need to upgrade that infrastructure, but with the proper legacy plan. And legacy is not just about what that venue per se is going to be used as, but as I was talking about, what's the transport network? What's going to come up around that venue? Is it going to be like, 100 kilometers out of the city that, nobody will ever really go over there? Similarly, what sport is it actually going to cater to? There are certain sports, and there is a lot of study that's been done that, there are maybe 7 to 8 or 10 sports that are more popular, which people will want to go and attend an event and watch that event. Supposing, in a city you create like a 20,000 seat stadium for a sport that nobody is interested in, that the general public has no interest in watching. It may take a long time for you, even if you start, generating that interest and pushing it forward, it can sometimes create it's a long time before that can actually happen as well. So I think those are also factors that need to come into play here as well, because it's again, like I said, I agree, we need that infrastructure. A lot of cities throughout the world already have that infrastructure. That's why they're talking about, yes, we can just do with temporary, because a lot of the major infrastructure they already have. In our case, we are going to have to build quite a significant amount. But what is that balance? It is a balance at the end of the day. What is that balance between temporary? What's that balance between permanent? What is that balance with the legacy? Other aspects that come in, hotels, transportation network, as I just said. So, and then again, the city's growth capability, right? And who is actually going to, the demographics, who's going to use that venue, for what sport? So again, all of those things also kind of come into play. Oh, good. Fine. Fine.
Hello. Isha? Am I audible?
Yes.
So I agree with both of you, but I'm leaning more towards what Colonel Anand is saying, because it's not just the population of India, right? When you bring an Olympics to India, there's a lot of interest in sports, which is not specifically an Olympic sport, but outside of it as well. And then if you're looking at a healthy India, we're looking at fitness. Fitness does not have to come with an Olympic sport, correct? Spaces can revive existing sports that we've played. When I was young, say 40, 50 years ago, we played certain sports which have died, correct? So I agree with you that you can't have big stadiums that have to fill thousands of people, because that is too much of a space for seating.
Yes.
That is where you could use the temporary part of the seating. We saw that at Paris as well. If you looked at the hockey stadium, it was done so well. And, they didn't actually construct proper roads. They had gravel to ensure that you don't skid. But it was done in such a good way that if they removed that bit, that space was still available. So there's so much to learn from there. But certainly in India, no matter how much infrastructure you give, it's never going to be too much. Sorry. The second thing is, while we look at parts of a venue that's temporary and parts of it is permanent, we could also use that mixed use, right? So there are some ways, or rather many ways, of not creating white elephants. So it's not so much about the size of the structure. It's not so much also about the distance. It is, because getting to a certain distance on a weekend through jogging, through cycling, is a fitness in itself. But to look at mixed use, and not just at sport, but also any activity that can lend a fitness bent to it. So if you look at a Cubbon Park in Bangalore, it's very well used. There are thousands of them walking because there's that ecosystem over there. So a part of legacy building is also, how do we provide for fitness? How do we provide for physical health? What are the spaces, green spaces, which people can use? And that is much more encouraging, I think.
Right.
Thank you.
No, again, I fully agree with what you just said, because it's, as I've said, it's not about just creating the venue, because it's the venue that won't be utilized. But do we need that sports infrastructure? Absolutely, we need that sports infrastructure for everywhere from a grassroots level all the way to elite athletes. We do need that infrastructure, but we don't need potentially 50,000 seats in every single corner, essentially. I think that's the point that I've been trying to make as well, that's where we bring that balance and, that legacy and what is really going to come out of it. That's where that comes in. And, thank you for the hockey venue. That was a Populous project, so thank you.
Hello, yes. I have 3 small questions for you. The first one is, what were currently the legal challenges that you faced in developing this project, considering sports is not gone over the years, but we have never had such a concrete idea until now. Thereafter, of course, we are talking of big projects, but since 2 years, as you might have seen in Ahmedabad and Gandhinagar, we have those big bridges being built. And below those bridges, we have a pillar and an area which is not really utilized. So I've lived in Netherlands, and we try to utilize basketball areas, football, anything that is there. Why can't we utilize those spaces with basketball hoops? And that's just like putting a hoop. And okay, I understand there's pollution around, but it's close to the metros. You can park your vehicle close by, and you can play basketball in an area. No one can disturb you because perhaps you can put a cage around. So this is my thought process: is how can we localize space with sports, these big areas? As someone mentioned, in Pune, you need to have requests and maintenance, etc. Whereas this, not really. But correct me if I'm wrong. And the last one is, when's the enclave projected to be concluded, and where is the BCORE space going to be in this place?
Sure. So firstly, on the legal aspects, I'll just kind of come back to that. I'm an architect, so I'm not probably the best person to give advice on any legal aspects. So I'll, refrain from that. But I think generally I love your idea in terms of making use of the space under flyovers. That's something that, again, is what we've seen in a lot of these countries. But again, since we're having this conversation among friends, I will kind of give a very sort of apt example of a discussion at some point in the past with a specific client, right? So when you do have those conversations, sometimes they say that, oh, it's the people. People will come and spoil it. So it's not really something that me as a designer specifically can address. If the apprehension behind the government not doing a certain thing is that, oh, it'll be too hard for them to maintain, and that the public themselves are not able to utilize that space in a respectful manner. Again, this is a very small instance, right? That doesn't mean that it applies to everything throughout. But that does kind of make you think that, is there another sort of level of intervention at a grassroots level that is required, from that aspect? And again, maybe if there are 50 of them that come up, maybe that's the catalyst, maybe there's one under every flyover, and that makes people also feel that, yes, this space is going to be utilized for that purpose, and then they start expecting it, and then, it doesn't seem something that's so strange and alien, and, it's not going to get used. I think maybe that's one of the solutions as well. So again, I think that's a great idea. We should, and there have been these initiatives. I have seen it throughout India in a couple of places where the underside of the flyovers have been utilized, and they're being used as well. But I've also seen areas where there are just, it's in pretty bad shape as well. So, yeah, I think it kind of goes both ways over there. And the enclave, the current idea is that by 2027, we will have a lot of the, works ongoing on that.
Hi, Isha. Probably it will be the last question from the audience.
Yeah.
I framed one question. In historical times, forts and other ancient structures were designed with ventilation systems that naturally kept spaces cool. So with today's technology, why aren't these sustainable design techniques being incorporated into large-scale sports complexes?
So they are actually, in a lot of venues, we are making use of these technologies. It's just something that it also depends on the location, right? And also it depends on the climate. Now, that ventilation is really important in a hot and humid climate specifically. So it is something that we make use in parts of the country where that is the climate. So we do try to do that actually in a lot of our projects. That's something that we're doing, and not just us actually. A lot of architects throughout the country are really doing that, and that's what I was mentioning earlier as well, that it is contextual. So for example, the other large step well, I know for a fact that that project, I mean, I shouldn't call it a project, it was 1,000 years ago, but that sort of that piece of architecture is something that inspires people even to this date, and throughout the country people use that as a reference. I've personally been in like 20 presentations where that same project has been used as a reference. So it is something that is it's valid till this date, because those are techniques that are for our climate and we should use them. We do absolutely use them, but again, those weren't designed for, say, 100,000 people in one go, right? There is a size sort of limitation as well, and scale, basically. So again, we do use them, but how effective they are at such a large scale remains to be seen as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry, last question. No, that's fine.
I'm so sorry, but we are very enthusiastic about, as I've told, that we are going to celebrate your session. So I have one small question, which is more like a theory, which goes like, whenever we talk about urban generation, it is like urban generation. So whatever enclave we have seen right now, it is all condensed in the very epicenter of the city. Around there, a lot of infrastructure is already present, and we are going to revamp the existing infrastructure in that sort. But how about Rashtriya Raksha University being a distance of 40-45 kilometers from the mainland? And no, that's a very valid question, I would say. We have a facility here. We do not have a very good transportation. We do not have a very good, I would say, regeneration facility. And you will see at the outskirts of mainland Ahmedabad and Gandhinagar, there are being urban regeneration, which is already happening. So there are buildings which are already in construction, and a lot of massive construction is being taking place. So why don't we shift the entire narrative of having Olympics in India, if at all it happens in future games? Why don't we shift the narratives to this is where I was telling, this is the theory from my end, that we play inside because we have a lot of infrastructure already present inside the city, and we stay outside because there is a lot of regeneration happening outside the city. So maybe if this could be a narrative for India, because every host city or country have a narrative to play, and this is what we have been discussing from day one. So why don't we propose a narrative? I just want to have your expertise on this particular theory of mine. That's it.
So when you say accommodation outside the city, do you mean athletes or do you mean spectators?
No, so what I understand from urban generations, there are certain determinants of urban generation, which includes public spaces, transportation facilities, maybe Olympic Village, which have good residences, then parks, city places, some public space for shopping malls and everything. So we do have that in Ahmedabad and Gandhinagar, which is mainland. When we talk about urban regeneration, it should not be condensing everything in the urban areas and letting go with our rural areas or some of the outskirts. So does that theory allow you to actually validate or do some insight on it?
Right. So the thing is that not all development would happen only in one area. You're absolutely right. And it is not even currently, that's not the proposal. There is just, I think, 3 or 4 venues that are proposed over there. There are other areas as well, and the thing is that in any city, that's what you will see as the model. We wouldn't really concentrate, and that's actually the way of making sure that it doesn't work, in case every single thing only happens in one area, right? So that is, it needs to be kind of spread out as well, but at the same time, the transport aspect. Now, for example, athletes their venue within, say, 30 minutes or so. So there are other aspects, other challenges that kind of come into play over there, which we need to make sure are also addressed at the same time. So that's why it's like a very careful sort of planning process that this goes through to ensure what are the right areas, where is that development going to happen, what is around it, do we see the potential of future growth over there, does it make sense to create something over there. So there's a lot of conversation that actually happens around that, and it goes over a couple of years actually to just really figure that thing out. So, but in terms of your proposition, that it's kind of what you're saying is it's distributed, which is correct.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Please.
It was a wonderful discussion. So with this, I hope everyone have received the answer that you are looking for. Moving forward, we will felicitate our expert. I would like to call upon Dr. Utsav Chaware for the felicitations of our today's expert.
Maybe I annoyed her the most.
Thank you, ma'am. It was all about our first expert session.